Hey guys, guess what? In this episode, I'm going to be answering your questions. So yes, this is the episode, the Q&A episode that I have been telling you guys about, and yes, I have gotten several questions on the Hurricanes, and we actually have quite a bit of news on the Hurricanes since our last episode, because apparently the Hurricanes decided to release some news very late at night Thursday night, and I'm like, well, I already recorded, so but I will talk about it. So first things first is I have a great partnership with SeatGeek. You get $20 off of your first purchase if you use promo code Caniac Reports, all one word. It's a great deal to use if you're trying to save some money on some tickets. And also, another thing too is starting this Friday is the month of August, meaning that you'll get lots of pre recorded episodes all month. There are no news, obviously, in these episodes, but there actually are a couple of interviews that I have lined up for the month of August. Hope you guys will enjoy those. But again, all these episodes are pre-recorded because I'm kind of giving myself a break while also giving you guys episodes so that you can listen to stuff in the month of August, because it is known to be a very slow month in the NHL. Another thing too is if you are watching on YouTube, please remember to hit that like button. Please comment down below and hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you never miss another episode. And if you are listening to us on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, please be sure to leave a rating and a review, and please follow the show. It really does help me out. So, a couple things I do want to talk about that's happening around the league. A few of them are just minor signings. Once I tell you guys these players' names, you're probably like, who? But I'm just going to name just a few here. And I'm not going to go great into detail with them. But Chicago, they signed Soderblom to a 2-year, $2.75 million contract. Slybakov signs a 2-year, $2.25 contract with the Islanders. And Connor Timmins signs a 2-year, $2.2 million contract with the Sabres. He apparently avoided arbitration. So I'm not going to dig into those, but they're just very minor signings with some of these teams around the league. Another thing, too, is obviously I told you guys in the last episode about the acquitted players from the Hockey Canada trial. Well, apparently the NHL came out with a statement saying they weren't reinstating the acquitted players, but the Players Association says that the players should be reinstated. So obviously there's a bit of a clash there between the Players Association and the league. So we'll see how that goes. Again, I am not going to give my opinion on it, just not. But it's going to be interesting to see how that gets unfolded between the Players Association and the NHL. So now comes the big Hurricanes news. And the big Hurricanes news is Jackson Blake is extended on a 8-year contract worth $5.625 million. And Hurricanes, because they're still able to do it, they were able to add deferred money, which lowers the cap hit to a $5.1 million contract. So why not do it when you know it's not going you're not going to be able to do it anymore come the next year under the new CBA. So just looking at the contract itself, I think 8 years. I do think I mean, he's only 20. He's a young dude. He's 22 years old. I honestly, I love the contract. I mean, 8 years, is there some risk? Maybe because it's 8 years, maybe. But regardless, I think, like, looking at the money aspect, I think it's a great contract because we know how good Jackson Blake was this past season. He got 17 goals, 17 assists, and you know, I think he's a player that's just going to keep getting better as the seasons get along. And obviously, this contract, I mean, the value is going to go down because of the cap going up. So in a few years, this contract could be worth something like 4 million today. So it's going to be very, very interesting how this contract ages, but I think it's going to age wonderfully for the Hurricanes. So it was just interesting because I'm sure a lot of us fans probably knew we have a plethora of wingers, and kind of thought that if there were going to be a trade, it might involve Jackson Blake because he hasn't signed an extension yet. Well, Carolina, if you can tell, they are really trying to shore up their contracts with a lot of their forwards. I believe I saw that fact that the Hurricanes have 7 forwards that last to 2029, I believe. I'm not 100% sent I got that right. It might have been 2029, but I did see something like that. And you know what? I mean, it's true. Hurricanes are locking up big contracts to that they really really pay off. And obviously, we know they try to do that. I mean, you look at the contract between Jackson Blake and Stankoven. I mean, those are obviously contracts that the Hurricanes looked at, like, yeah, they might not be worth that now, but in the future, it's going to be a bargain. Well, if you guys remember, they kind of did the same thing with KK. Now, there might be some people that think that the way KK is playing and look at that contract, like, oh, it's fine. Personally, I have a bit of a problem with it, um, mainly due to his performance, not the money. Mainly just because, I mean, the cap, it keeps going up. So it's not the contract that I have a problem with KK. It's just the fact that I think the expectation that comes with that contract, he's not really hitting it. So yeah, that's kind of the big news, the big fish that came out from Hurricanes hockey. No one saw this coming. I'm sure when you guys saw the news, you're like, wow, didn't expect this. So Hurricanes, you know what? They are definitely being proactive this offseason. I was kind of just expecting them to sign somebody like a Logan Stankoven to an extension, and that's it. But no, they have their eyes on Jackson Blake as well, and we'll just see how those contracts do. And another interesting thing about this contract, again, I think there's another comparison between Blake and Stankoven. I think the Hurricanes probably view Stankoven a little bit more valuable compared to Jackson Blake if you just look at the money aspect. And I do think if you look at both Stankoven and Blake, I think both are players that skate very, very well, and both are really good at handling the puck. I would say Blake is a better puck handler than Logan Stankoven, but I would say probably Stankoven is a little bit smarter with his puck, like his vision, his IQ. And I think Stankoven has a little bit of a better shot. But regardless, great, great contract. The future, I think, of this Hurricanes team is definitely, definitely bright. I'd be surprised if they extended Nikishin, but hey, you never know. I mean, Nikishin, I mean, he's eligible to be extended. I think he is. I think. 100% on that. But if they can extend him, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. Really, just wouldn't. So that's kind of it in the news world surrounding both the league and the Hurricanes. But now am going to get to your guys' questions here. And the first question, oh, and for the record, when it comes to the questions, I asked everybody for questions. So obviously, I asked on X, I asked on Instagram, I asked on Blue Sky, TikTok, and I even asked a couple of friends as well. So I tried to get as much questions as I could, and you know what? I have 11 questions to go over. Okay, so the first question I have coming from an actual friend, his name is Logan. And I also asked him, be like, hey, if you have any questions, I know you love the Hurricanes, fire them away. And he gave me quite a few. The first question is, are you worried that Seth Jarvis's shoulder injury will become more of a problem later in the season since he decided to skip out on having surgery? I think that is a very, very good question, actually, to have. I think this is one of the best answer I could give you is I think only time will tell. But I will say this, I am a little bit worried with his shoulder. Now, granted, he's had is a problem with his shoulder quite a bit, and yet he is still produced. So while I am still worried, at the same time, I mean you've seen him play with his shoulder being hurt. He still plays very very good, and I think he will definitely still become a very good key player, and maybe he becomes the second line center for the Hurricanes. So we'll see. But obviously, the main reason why I think Seth Jarvis avoided having surgery on the shoulder was so that he could be eligible to play in the Olympics. So that is your answer, Logan. The next question, also from Logan, is a hot topic this offseason was that the Canes overpaid for Keandre Miller. What is your opinion on the acquisition, and do you think it was worth giving up Scott Morrow for him? So I do think right now, as of right now, the contract that we gave Miller is a bit pricey. And my opinion on the acquisition, I think it was worth the cost because if you look at the cost, it was basically a first round pick. It was a conditional first round pick, a second, and I believe Scott Morrow. I think there's a third round pick that I keep forgetting on that trade, but I am going to look it up here because it's in the form of an offer sheet. Okay, so the full trade is basically the Hurricanes getting Keandre Miller and the Rangers get Scott Morrow, a 2026 first round pick that's conditional, and a 2026 second round pick. So, yeah, there is actually no third round pick involved. But regardless, it does look like the form of an offer sheet. And Carolina was even rumored to offer sheet Evan Bouchard. And that's why Edmonton got that contract done with Bouchard in the rush because they're like, oh, Carolina's probably going to offer sheet him. So while I think that contract is probably just a tad high, I think right now it's going to be a bargain in a couple years because the cap is going to be going up. That's just the matter of fact. So I like the trade because I think what you're adding with Miller is a guy that can skate very, very well. You're adding a guy that brings a lot of physicality. He has a bit of an offensive touch. And just by looking at those stuff, if you look at the clip that the Hurricanes made and released on the whole behind the scenes stuff of acquiring Keandre Miller, Brittamore said he has shades of Brady Shea. And I'm sure you guys remember how good Brady Shea was when he was with the Hurricanes. So obviously they are seeing that comparison in Keandre Miller. And the guy's 25 years old. And I really think it is a good trade. But it does bring up the question of who's going to be playing on their offside. And from what it sounds like Jacob Slavin might be playing on their offside. So, another great question, Logan. And the next question that I have here is take a few minutes and rank the teams of the Metro and why they are the ranking you place them. Sorry, I kind of butchered that question. Jeffrey Williams from X. So he asked that question. Now, I am going to be doing an episode in September giving my rankings, or I would say my predictions on the standings for the upcoming season. So I am answering this question, but I'm also answering this in the fact that it's going to be in a later episode where you'll fully see my answer on ranking the teams of the Metro. I even not only am I predicting the standings in an upcoming episode, but I'm also doing an analysis of the Metro division because the Hurricanes are in that division, and obviously, you look at the schedule. The teams that they play against the most are divisional teams. So that's why I'll be having, I believe, like a 2-part episode on looking at the foes of the Metros like I did last year. So I answer your question, I know on next, but I'm answering it here on the episode as well. The next question comes from David Scott on X. And he says, how worried should we be about PK prior to the start of the season? Oh, we should be worried. I completely agree. We really should be worried. Yes, he had a good regular season, but I really think Rod had the door open for him to take goalie 1 for the playoffs, and he fell flat on his face. Can we only depend on Freddie? Well, I think in the playoffs, I don't. So he did play a couple games, but I didn't necessarily think of those games as Brendan Moore being like, hey, here's your opportunity. It was more of the fact being like, hey, this is your opportunity because right now Anderson's hurt. And that's kind of how I view those playoff games. Because if you remember, Anderson did take a hit when they were at New Jersey. So Kochetkov in the playoffs didn't do good. Regular season, up and down. He is the ultimate wild card. We just don't know which Kochetkov we are having. And that is really, really frustrating considering he's already been in the NHL for quite a few seasons. And if you remember, I mean, obviously his performance this past season, he was all over the place. I mean, he was really, really, really good. He was really, really bad. You look at the season before, there was actually a fixed point in time where he started to play really good. If you remember, it was the last half of the season, and he went on a huge streak of just playing absolute dominant string of hockey. But he didn't really do that this season. So, I mean, the question of can we only depend on Freddie? It's really a matter of how Kochetkov plays. It really, really is. And I mean, so an interview you guys will be having in August that's going to be coming up is a guy who's returning back to the podcast, and Adam Gold. And I completely agree with him in the fact that in order for Kochetkov to take a step, he just got to get rid of the bad goals. And I completely agree. So we'll see how Kochetkov does this season, but he definitely needs to improve. He was, to me, one of the disappointments coming out of last season as a whole, including the playoffs. So hopefully that answers your question, David. The next question is from Logan again, my friend. He's a huge Hurricanes fan. Any way to early predictions for any potential trades? Do you predict any current players on the roster will be traded by the deadline? I actually, when it comes to players on the roster getting traded by the deadline, it depends on what they are getting. I think if you're getting probably a second line center, a really, really good second line center, then yeah, you're going to have someone on the roster that you're going to have to give up because, I mean, nobody is shopping a second line center other than probably Marco Rossi. But even then, Bill Guerin from Minnesota said recently, oh, we're just going to try and keep him. So technically, nobody's shopping a second line center because those are in huge demand right now. But a prediction for any potential trades again, I would say the most likely scenario is that if they do trade, they try to get someone who's a second line center. Obviously, just because you look, I mean, the two positions I see where they're not looking for the Hurricanes are left-handed defensemen because we have a ton, and wingers. So that kind of leaves with probably goaltending. I can't see them trading anybody and on the goaltending front to upgrade just because I think Anderson kind of showed that when he's healthy, he's a top 10 goalie. And on the big spot, I would say, is probably just that center core right there. And obviously, you have that second line center question. And I do think at this point, the Hurricanes are definitely going to be trying to solve this internally. And even though I could see Stankoven as our second line center, I really, really could. I think it's probably going to be Seth Jarvis being there, but I could be wrong. So uh, I don't have any predictions for Wade. I don't have any way too early predictions for any potential trades, but I do think if they get someone like a second line center, they're going to have to give up a roster player, especially by the deadline. I could see the Hurricanes making a run at the deadline, especially with the amount of cap space that they currently have. I honestly, that cap space is going to be almost nothing if they don't use it by the deadline. I just think that's just too much cap space that you're just leaving for dead. So I do think the Hurricanes do something by the deadline. It's just when. That it really is a matter of when. The next question is from Canes and Dogs on X. And he said, who will be the second center upgrade the Canes are looking for? And when will the trade be completed? So I can tell you probably are hoping that the Hurricanes look for the solution for the second line center problem externally. And you know what? I I wish they had the feeling as well, but I don't think they had that feeling. I think, like I just said, that they're going to try Stankoven and Jarvis first at second line center. Now, I'm not going to say and be like, oh, they can do it. I mean, I think they have the capabilities, but I think can and will do it are two separate scenarios. And if they don't do it, I definitely do think that they're probably going to have to get someone outside the organization through a trade in order to get it. I know this is probably more of a dream, but man, I would love to get a guy like, and I'm just going to throw it out there, Mason McTavish. And the reason why I'd love to get a guy like Mason McTavish, and I think it could make sense. Again, we signed Jackson Blake to a long extension, so kind of makes the possibility of a McTavish trade even harder. But you look at the Anaheim's roster right now. They have very, very good center core because they added Mikael Granlund to the fact that they already have Leo Carlson. He's going to be their number one center. Then you have Mason McTavish, who's going to play the third scoring line as the center. But does McTavish want that? I think is the question. And also, if you look at the roster too, they're pretty thin on the right wing. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, maybe Jackson Blake and McTavish are the core of the deal. Whereas the Hurricanes will probably have to add a little bit more. I mean, if I was Anaheim's GM, and their GM is Pat Verbeek, if you guys knew that, but if I was Anaheim's GM, I'd be like, well, I kind of want a little bit more than just Blake. And I understand that. So I think McTavish is a great example of a guy who could be it. Marco Rossi, he's not a big guy. McTavish is. He's another player I think the Canes could be looking at for a second line center. I think another center, he's a bit of a veteran, but I think he fit in well with the Hurricanes. That is Ryan O'Reilly from Nashville. Maybe they look at Shane Pinto from Ottawa. So I think there are some opportunities there. It's just nobody's shopping a second line center right now. So I do think the best course of action as of right now, but again, it could change depending how Jarvis and Stankoven do at second line center, is to look at this and fix this internally. So hopefully that answers your question, Canes and Dogs on X. The next question is from Matthew on X, and he says, which of our left-handed defensemen do you think should play on the right side? I think the player that should play on his right side. Oh, man. This is really tough. It really is. And I don't think there's a wrong answer to it. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so tough to answer this. But I think if it was up to me, I would probably put Gossesbear on his right just because he's really good offensively. That's if it was up to me. I think the most likely scenario is that I think the Hurricanes are going to try Jacob Slavin as the right-handed defenseman because obviously, I mean, he is a left-handed defenseman, but he's going to play on his offside. But who better can you do it with than Jacob Slavin? Because he is the best defenseman. He is the cornerstone on that blue line. So I think that is what's going to happen. But if it was up to me, I probably maybe put Shane Gossesbear on his offside. But Slavin, I'm telling you, he is such a mastery on the blue line. I'm sure he can handle playing on his offside. I'd rather, I mean, in terms of, I think you look at it from a practical area, then you probably should put Slavin on his offsides first just because you know he can do it. So hopefully that answers the question, Matthew. The next question is coming from my dad. If you guys remember, he's or has been listening to the podcast for a long time, like for years, then you've probably heard a couple episodes with my dad coming on the podcast. But he asked me a question of what will the Canes do with the remaining $11 million in cap space? Well, I do think they're going to spend most of it by the deadline. I think it's foolish for them to not use any of it. But I think what they'll probably do, I think, and again, I'm just kind of looking at the history of the Hurricanes in the playoffs here because even though it's important for them to have a good regular season, this team's success is bound on how they do in the playoffs. And I would say they probably need to do a couple of things. One, I think, is on the condition of how Jarvis or Stankoven plays at second line center. If it doesn't work, then yeah, you need to go and get a second line center. And I would say another thing too that they should probably add is a depth right-handed defenseman. Because you look at this decor, while I think it's excellent, you also have Mike Riley as the seventh defenseman, and he also shoots left-handed. So I would think the Hurricanes by trade deadline be like, you know what, we're going to make sure that if we do have an injury on the blue line, that we are absolutely covered. So we already have a left-handed depth defenseman in Mike Riley. We probably need to get a right-handed defenseman that's in the form of Mike Riley to come to Carolina. So I would say those are the two things Carolina probably could do. I think they could also add another depth forward probably just because you can never have too much depth in this league. So I guess you could say three things. The Hurricanes could add another depth up front in the forward group. I think a right-handed defenseman in terms of depth as well. And if Jarvis, Stankoven, if that experiment as them being second line center just can't be, then you're going to have to shore up the second line center as well. So I think that's what they'll probably do with the $11 million in cap. The next question also comes from my dad, and he says, "Will Svesh be a 30-goal player next year?" I am going to say yes because of how he did in the playoffs, but ultimately, I do not know. But I am going to say yes because I'm giving him the benefit of doubt. Hopefully, he has kind of learned from his playoff experience, just like, okay, I know what level I need to play at in order to be impactful. And he was. It was very impactful in the playoffs. So that's another, I think that's another good. These are all good questions for the record. I'm loving these questions. The next question, also coming from my dad, he asked me quite a few questions. Will the Canes need a fourth goalie to play in the AHL if Anderson gets hurt? Well, I think they kind of already solved that with getting the Russian Amir Mitikov from the KHL. Because if you look at the Hurricanes goalies right now, with the addition of him, is obviously Anderson Kochekov. They are our NHL starters. And then you look at the AHL, we have 4 goalies. We have Ruslan Kaziev. Now, do I think he plays, honestly, any AHL games? Very, very few. I think the same goes for Nikita Kwap. Very few AHL games. But you have those 2 goalies. And then you have, I think, 2 goalies above them that are going to be playing the majority of the games down in Chicago. And that's Caden Primo and Amir Mitikov. And I think Caden Primo is definitely going to be that first call up whenever Anderson gets hurt. So we'll see how the goalie position does for us, not just for Anderson or Kochekov, but for all of our goalies that we have signed. And one thing that's I do like about heading to the season is we do have more options in terms of goalies. So I do think the Canes sort of fix that. So that's, well, actually, there's one more question here. I saved this question for last, and I hope he hears it. Don't you listeners miss the better Sam? And this comes from Huge Caniac on X. If you guys don't know who that is, oh man. Just stop listening to this episode. Well, if you guys don't know, Huge Caniac is my former co-host Sam Driscoll, who decided to ask a question on this episode. And you know what? I'm going to say this in a very, very funny way. No, they don't. The podcast has improved without you, Sam. They have. They have. So, yeah. That's it for all the questions on this Q&A episode. I really hope you guys enjoy it, and I really hope you guys enjoy the August episodes. Again, I pre-recorded just lots of episodes. There are a couple episodes I've done interviews with. Adam is one of them. I'm going to leave the next one as a mystery because he's been on a couple of times. I can already tell. I'm just going to say this right now because I'm still recording, obviously, that Huge Caniac is in the building with me. So I will see you guys for the next episode.